welcome back everyone to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club and weekly podcast where we play games and brew good conversations together. I am your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And it looks like our journey on the eye is coming to a close this week.
We've got lots of plans.
I mean, hopefully by now, yeah, hopefully by now you're wide awake. And the choices that you've made have hopefully led to endings that you enjoy, or maybe not. I think there's a lot to dig into because there are many endings that you can encounter. We'll be talking about our final experiences with Citizen Sleeper today. If you've been following along, we've been playing the game the whole month through. And if you'd like to join the conversation, we have our monthly hangout this weekend. If you're listening to the launch of the podcast on Saturday, July 27th at 3 p.m. Pacific, we're going to all be hanging out, chatting about the game and diving into any of the last questions or theories we have. But before we get into that, we always like to start off with the Pastry Case because that's our chance to talk about what's going on in the industry, what we've been playing, and all that good stuff. We have a bit of a shorter episode today, so we thought we would just jump right into what we've been engaging with. And Joel, would you like to kick us off?
It's a really long list of games. I've been playing so many games. Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree. And then I did take some time. I stopped and I set aside some time for Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree. So awesome. Lots of that for this period. Like I had that one of those streaks where it's like, oh, is it 1:30 in the morning? Well, I'm not going to be able to sleep because my anxiety and blood pressure is spiking, but guess I'll try.
Gosh, spiking because of like the boss battles and like just getting into the game at this point.
Yes. And like I'm the thing that I most dislike about this game is the thing they've like absolutely got me pegged on, which is having locked parts of a map in an open world game is absolutely like, I know for you, you're like I've got to finish all the side quests. For me, it's like, I have to unlock the whole map first thing immediately. It's the most important thing for me to do.
Yeah.
And I cannot get to the top of this map. I have probably put hours into this journey. I try to just like do it on my own. I tried all these paths. None of them got me there. So now I found like a tutorial and it's like, oh, well, you could have made it in under an hour, but it's the journey before destination.
Right. Exactly. A little bit of Sanderson there for everyone. That's cool. I mean, that's kind of cool though, that I don't know. I enjoy when games you think it's like, oh, it's going to be a straightforward path. I should be able to get there. I mean, after a point, it does get a little bit frustrating when you're just like, okay, I've tried all of these places. How the heck do I get there? But it's neat that they're kind of making you work for it. I don't know. I enjoy that in a game personally, but I can also imagine if you're like, I just want to get it done.
No, they got me. They have me pegged. They found like the perfect thing to keep a player like me fully engaged.
Nice. So do you feel like you've made, I guess, how far do you think you are? Have you been keeping track of that? Or are you just not even thinking about it, enjoying the ride?
I haven't, the way that I think you typically measure these things is like how many of the top tier bosses have you fought and battled? And I think I've only fought and battled 2 of like maybe 10 or so. So not that many. But I fought a lot of like minor bosses to like unlock different things, which is kind of my vibe. Like I like to get really OP and then go and do all the big boss boys. So yeah, that's my vibe. But what about you? What are you playing right now?
I have been hopping around with a lot of games and a lot of books, so I won't spend tons of time on every single one of them. For folks who have not gotten a chance to play click holding and you are interested in it, I highly recommend it. The content warnings were not lying. It is a very distressing game to play. It was, for me, about 40 minutes of feeling like I was holding my breath the entire time, not ever breathing fully. But this game is one where the premise, I guess for folks who haven't heard of it, is you are just sitting in what seems to be like a hotel room, a dingy hotel room. There is a person in front of you wearing a mask, and you are just supposed to click on a tally clicker, and they just watch you, and they want you to keep clicking. And it is so uncomfortable, like at its as best it's like uncomfortable, at its worst it was like I had to stop for a second to process what was happening because it was really intense. It's done by Strange Scaffold, friend of the show, Zalavir, like just an amazing person, leader in the community for game developers, and this did not disappoint. And it's really cool because this is an Outer Sloth funded title, which for folks who are familiar with the game Among Us, they created an indie game fund to sort of give back to the community a while back. And so this is just really cool to see. I think this isn't the first, I think this is maybe the third launched title, second or third launched title from the Outer Sloth Fund. But regardless, it's a great group of people, a really powerful game. I think if you're not into it is an artsy title. So I think if you're not into maybe something that's a bit more like artsy, gives you stuff to chew on, more reflection based, probably not up your alley. But I feel like most of the listeners here probably will enjoy something like Click Holding. I think it's sort of up our alley. I've been playing a lot of Nine Souls, which has been amazing. I've gotten through, I think, probably about a third of the game. I've gotten through sort of two major areas,
Wow.
2 or 3. I don't feel like it's going to be too much bigger. So yeah, I'm really excited. It's the first time I've ever felt successful parrying. They give you a nice big window to do it. They give you a lot of signals. It's awesome. Can't get enough of Nine Souls.
It's so good.
Flock has been my cozy game sort of go-to for the last couple of days. This is very much in the veins of Sky or Journey, where there's no violence, no combat. The goal is just enjoying a world, exploring. And you are sort of the shepherd person, I guess, who likes to herd these bird-like critters. They're not really actually birds. They're all very like whimsical and weird, but you just go around and explore the world and you collect these birds and then just build your flock up. What's really cool is that there's multiplayer. So I've been playing this in multiplayer with some friends, and it's so much fun because you can just hop in and out. You don't need like a specific save. You don't need a special server. It's just you give them a code and they can, at any point in time, wherever they're at in the game or wherever you're at in the game, they can just hop in and play with you. And it's
That's
so
very cool.
Chill.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's colorful. It's like so bright and happy.
Have you gotten to play with any folks yet on it?
Yeah, I've been playing it with a bunch of friends. So it's just like a couple, like 3 different friend groups all have been playing it. And so I've been like hopping in with them just kind of at random intervals. Sam and I have been playing it, which is really cool because we don't often play games together. We have very different tastes. So it's nice that this is a game that I felt like, oh, a lot of people are getting into, and it's been really cool.
You're flocking around.
Exactly. And then Dungeons of Hinterberg and Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I've started both of those. I'll probably have more to say on them in the next podcast. But so far, they're both really good. I will say Dungeons of Hinterberg is like great for Zelda-esque dungeon crawling puzzle solving. The combat's really simplistic, but I think there's so much variety. It's okay that it's like really simple and not super like brain intensive. But Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, I am so into this game. It is so good. I think if you like secrets and mysteries, escape rooms, like this is the kind of game you want to play. So definitely Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
That sounds like such a beautiful title. It just like rolls off the tongue. That's Lorelei and the Laser Eye. I love that.
Yeah, it's by the folks who did Sayonara Wild Hearts. So did you play Sayonara? I feel like you would dig it because it's basically a music video in game form. It's like an endless runner kind of feel.
Cool.
But for folks who have played Sayonara Wild Hearts, it's by the same people. So it's super stylish and you really can't go wrong. So yeah, that's, I think, it for the pastry case. Unless you've got anything else you'd like to add.
I'm just so eager to talk about my citizens and my sleepers this week.
Yeah. Before we get into that, though, just finishing up, we've got notable releases for the indie games of July 23rd through the 29th. We have Ete, which is like a painting game that's coming out on the 23rd on PC. The Star Named Eos, which is like a photography meets puzzle game on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC on the 23rd. and then 2 tile sliding games, which I think is very weird because it's such a niche mechanic, but now there's 2 of them and they come out in the same week. We have Slider, which is going to be free on Steam. And it's basically you're moving around tile pieces and that's part of your map. So you get to like solve puzzles by moving pieces around. And Arranger, a role puzzling adventure where you're pulling tiles to move your character. And that's also out on the 25th on Switch and PC. So
very cool. What
very
are the
solid
odds 2 Slider games would come out in the same week? Interesting. I always love those things. I'm always obsessed with them, and I'm also very bad at them. I can't think more than like 1 slide ahead.
I'm okay. Like when I was a kid, I was pretty abysmal, but I feel like now as an adult, I've like grown into that skill.
Wow.
I'm pretty decent at slider tile games. So that's my one skill.
I wonder if it's like we've rearranged furniture in rooms so many times that now it's like, oh, I see what has to move first so that I can do this. Like
all the years of moving.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Citizen Sleeper. Last time we finished, and we preface this every time just to be sure, but every week we go through episodically. So, we have been playing, and we last ended at the start of no, we didn't. We ended at the end of Ethan's tab. That's right. And so, everything basically this week through the end of the game. Full spoiler. So if you want to go through in a less spoiler fashion, go back, listen at the beginning, and we will go episodically through each chunk of the game. Only spoiling up to that specific point we named the episode. But this week, final episode for Citizen Sleeper. So that means anything is fair game. So we ended, and Ethan's tab had been concluded, but we had a whole new deal with Ethan in terms of the contract and sort of what's going on. Would you like to update us on what's going on with our dear friend?
Ethan is not looking good, y'all. Like, poor Ethan, after this poor mercenary bounty hunter, this poor guy who's just out here doing his best. As you know, we saw him last time. We kind of knocked him around a little bit, because his contract had ended, so he no longer had a reason to take us out. He gets thrown out of the bar with this huge tab and is like, well, when are we going to see this person again? And a new clock started. I think it was called Ethan's Revenge. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got to start by saying, like, that the Ethan's Revenge clock felt so long to me. Like, I finished like 6 different quest lines during this period. And I was just like, oh, this guy is gone. Like, I'm never going to see him again. And so when he shows back up, after I had found a nice little commune and a new place to sleep, which we'll talk about, he shows up in my bedroom and is like, hey, dude, Maywick is coming. And Maywick is kind of described as a total like badass bounty hunter, disruptor, like the person you call to take down governments kind of thing. I think they just specifically described him as destroying the Winterlight, the ship, the Winterlight.
Yeah. Which we had heard about previously in an earlier side quest.
I actually specifically wrote on a note for myself. I don't remember what the Winterlight was. Ask Jenny, because it definitely came up earlier. So do you remember what the context of that was?
Yes. So that second ship that we got with Dragos, way back near the beginning of our time in the Eye, if you were able to, you could investigate and learn more about the ship, and it was called the Winterlight. And we learned that it was not just a ship that had gotten into an accident, but it was targeted. And that was our first sort of like nugget of information about how sleepers are being hunted, and there are specific groups, but more importantly, that's really our first introduction to Maywick. We just didn't know it yet.
And you are kind of given a choice in this moment that if you are willing to go pay the tab of Ethan, he will back you. He will help you with the Maywick problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious to hear what you did. I'm just going to say this moment actually represented a huge mindset shift for me for the whole rest of how I played this game. But I chose
Interesting.
not to fund the tab or even suggest that I would. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what did you do with this?
So I didn't even like occur to me to not do the tab, which was really interesting. I was basically like, you know what? I don't like you. You're kind of a dick, but I feel like I need to help you out, partially because there was a line in the game where it said the Maywick is coming. Um, it said you need to either leave the station, get protection, or disable the tracker. At this point, I had not yet been able to disable the tracker. Feng was continuously still just giving me
Mm-hmm.
the like runaround
Mm-hmm.
and asking me to do more for nothing. And so I was like, at this point, looking at the number of essentially the slots that I needed to get this guy presumably on my side if I paid off his debt, I was like, it's a risk because I don't know if he's going to hold his end of the deal, but it's a risk I'm willing to take because I need to not have my eggs in one basket. Because if Maywick comes, I don't know if I can survive that. And so I don't know if I can leave the station. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to disable the tracker in time. Let me just see if I can get Ethan on my side. So I was just like, I'm going to just try to help you. And that's also how I've been playing. I'm like, you know what? I'll try and give you a little help if I can. We'll see.
So I kind of turned heel in this moment
Mm-hmm.
because this was after. So for me, and we'll talk about kind of Fang and the tracker. I think it's a storyline worth going pretty deep into. But I kind of had felt like I was getting the complete runaround from Fang, and that kind of happened right before this. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
my new mindset is anyone that doesn't treat me like a person, screw those people. I'm done with
Mm-hmm.
them. I'm not doing tasks for people. I'm not doing quid pro quos anymore. I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I'm eager to talk about how all of this played out for me because what were the three things that you said you had to do? Is disable the tracker, make a deal with Ethan, or like get off the
Well,
ship?
yeah. So it doesn't say make a deal with Ethan, but I assumed this was the only protection we could get was
Uh-huh.
make a deal with Ethan. But yeah, leave the station, get protection, or disable the tracker before Maywick shows.
So I didn't do any of those three things before Maywick showed up. And
Oh, wow.
we will talk about what that meant for my ending.
Yeah.
Uh, but the wild thing is when my mindset shifted to that, I found myself struggling to fill time. Like once I started taking the mindset that like unless this person is treating me like a person, I'm not doing it. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, there's really not much to do here. And so I think this is like worth digging into. I saw there was a lot of chatter in the Discord about how like transactional so many of these relationships are.
Mm-hmm.
And I like now that I've played this game through and finished it, it's like there are very few people aboard this ship that treat you like an equal, that don't have any issues with your
Mm-hmm.
like type of intelligence or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just like it really changed my experience for the back half of this game.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where now I'm curious. I'm really curious who you ended up spending time with, and also did you find your resources to be more available, like because I was struggling constantly because I was giving energy not just to like keep myself alive, but
Mm.
I'm giving energy to other people. I'm trying to decide whether or not I eat so they can like have something. And did
Wow.
you find yourself like that? It was even like the cat. I'm like, I'm gonna give this like the cryo to the cat
I didn't
because
even meet a cat.
oh my gosh. So it's like there's this element, I think, of yeah, I think, oh man, that's really interesting. Um, but I'm wondering, did you feel like you had an easier time surviving because of it? Like significantly easier or even
Well,
marginally easier?
I must have, because if I'm not giving my energy, like I did very few missions that required me to just like give energy. Like
Mm-hmm.
that almost never happened. But once I unlocked at the base of the hub, there was like a shop where you could sell mushrooms or sell
Mm-hmm.
ship mine cores, and you get like a lot of chits for that. Once I started doing that, I didn't have issues with money anymore. I I unlocked in my character tree. One of the first things that I fully unlocked was everything's 20% off.
Yep.
So like once you do that, it's like, okay, like I can survive for myself now. I can
Mm-hmm.
get. I usually had like a stock of stabilizers on me. Like I didn't really deal with like running low on dice. Uh, and yeah, it just really changed my experience. I am
Wow.
unsure how to even talk about this because I met during this period my favorite character this entire game. I'm sure most people do. Um, but like this game has so many different branches, and what you choose to spend your time on just drastically changes your experience. Like you mentioned a cat. I'm sure there's worlds of people that I did not meet at all as a part of this game.
Yeah, well, because I'm thinking there's a whole side quest up in the hub where there are two people working in this sort of bay area, like engineering bay area. And to even really interact with them, they say, hey, we're trying to open up this like thing. Could you give us some seed funding? And it's like, that's a whole side quest and level of sort of interaction and story that I'm thinking you probably did not get to or engage
No,
with because,
that was my
yeah,
favorite story. That was the one.
you did. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, that's amazing.
Because it was like, so Bliss, you make
Yep.
your way to the top of the hub, you meet Bliss, who I don't know what their deal is. Are they wearing a space suit and they're all blue, or are they also kind of a robot? Like I couldn't quite tell what was happening
Hmm.
there. But she offered me equal partnership with investment. And I
Yep.
was like, this is what I'm looking for. This is where I spend my time. This is where my priority is. And
Yeah.
like I loved that storyline. It was one of my favorite storylines of the whole game.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I think I really like it was really tough because I think in investing all of that time and money with them, obviously you have to put away other ones, but yeah, I think theirs was definitely one of my favorites as well.
Yeah. So maybe we should just talk about some of the big storylines. Like we've referenced Fang. Like, should we talk about like where we left off was we had kind of found what was the guy's name, right? At
Well,
the end
actually,
of
hold on.
yeah.
Was that so we talked a little bit about do we want to finish the Maywick
Oh, sure.
thing
Just go through the whole thing.
because um that way we go through the full Maywick storyline and then we can go back and just like basically go through line by
Sure.
line or
Love it.
each characters. Because I'm also just genuinely curious, like what happened with Maywick then? If we finished Ethan, finished Maywick, like what happened for you with those two?
So the Maywick clock starts. It's a very long clock. I'm struggling to fill my time. And uh, the clock ends on the same day that my get the tracker out of you clock ends, on the same
Mm-hmm.
day that my hey, there's a ship waiting for you that will take you off of this freight ends. But just because
Mm-hmm.
of the way I think they kind of force these interactions to go, Maywick found me. Well, I guess Ethan technically found me first and was like, I'm
Right.
helping Maywick, yada yada, and I pull a gun on you, and Maywick shoots him, which
Mm-hmm.
we love. And then Maywick starts like attacking me, and essentially a Ethan's gun slipped out of his pocket, and I took it and I shot Maywick, and that
Mm-hmm.
was how the Maywick story ended for me.
Interesting. That's what the same thing I got as well. So what happened with me was that in helping Ethan, we finally got him, you know, his debt was we thought was paid, but then it turns out the folks at the compressor, they're just going to keep
Mm,
him going. Like they're not going to alleviate him of his duty. They're just going to keep dragging him on. And so he gets really pissed and he's like, we need to get my gun back because Maywick is coming and I have no way of protecting you unless we have the gun. And at this point, I'm like, this is not a good idea because he's going to get the gun and I promise you he's going to betray me. But I was like, you know what? I invested this much time into this. I'm going to have to write it out. I'm just going to do it. I want to see what happens. And so I was able to steal successfully the gun from the bar. Nothing happened there. And I gave him the gun back. And that's when the Maywick clock hadn't even gotten to 50% for me. Like I had finished his debt payment. Like maybe the Maywick clock was just over a quarter of the way filled. And so I was like in my head, I have so much time till Maywick shows up. It forced the Maywick stuff to happen right then.
What?
And so, yeah.
Whoa.
So after Ethan gets the gun, he instantly points it at me and it's just like, yo, you try to have a heart of gold, but there's nothing like that can exist in this system. Like you're a fool. And in the middle of his big speech, basically saying he's going to betray me, the same thing happens as with your playthrough where Maywick shows up, shoots him in the back, basically. Yeah. And what happens is I grab the gun and I shoot Maywick, and then we're done. And I was, it made me so sad, I think, because I got the achievement. It was like something about seeing consequences to their bitter end or something like that. And I was just like, I hate that I wanted so badly to believe in like Ethan maybe getting changed, but he did not, unfortunately, which I also had in the back of my mind and I was ready for. But yeah, so my Maywick clock, super fast. It was done before it even started, really.
That's so wild. Like the way these designers chose to prioritize quests, execute clocks, and then like when seeming like kind of quote unrelated things happen to force some of those other clocks to their conclusion. That is some really interesting game design.
Yeah. So, okay. So now let's kind of go rewind a little bit. You at the same time, before as all this Maywick clock is running, you're doing the Fang quest. How did that go for you?
So let me start with this. I didn't want to do the Fang quest. I basically so the last time we talked, I think there was the guy named Harden that we had kind of busted, and we had this recording. We're going to get his network. And the next thing that happens is if you go to Fang to hopefully get your tracker out, Fang's been kicked out of his office. He's on the run. Harden. Why can't I remember this? Harden and his crew have taken over his space, and they're like, the whole like we're watching you kind of thing happens. At this point, I was like, I'm never getting this tracker out. It's not gonna happen. But I go to the tea house to gamble a lot. That was one of my early ways to make money. And so I show up to the tea house, and there's Fang, Tabor Tea House. And Fang is off his rocker. Like, he just does not seem like he has it together. He seems really scattered. Like, he has all these plans for how he's going to like make this right, but it doesn't really sound like a cohesive plan. And whatever people were backing him, I'm not getting the sense that they're around anymore, and essentially asks that you continue helping him get dirt on these other agents and yada yada. So that is like kind of the next big phase of Fang, but there's a really important motif that comes up both in this confrontation with Harden inside Fang's office, and then Fang references it really explicitly, the idea that there are true citizens of the eye and there are not true citizens of the eye, which is just that very classic us versus them, like the seeds of fascism kind of being planted. And I thought that was done really, really well. So, but at that point, like, you don't get a choice to say, I'm not doing this Fang. Like, you are kind of through dialogue kind of forced to say, sure, yeah, I'll do this. So yeah, that was kind of like my next big Fang chunk. Did you have kind of a similar experience? Like, what was your feeling I'm assuming you continued, like when you met up with him again?
I mean, I got through those same story beats, but I actually ended up stopping because, again, it's like I had forced the Maywick encounter, and by the time I had killed Maywick, I was like, I have other priorities, frankly, because my priority was Lemon Mina, and I wanted to make sure I had finished that quest. And so I ended up just not really pursuing the like removal of the tracker too heavily. And so I think I missed out on a lot of that storyline and story beat, which is really unfortunate because I wanted to find, like, I think for me, being able to like officially remove the tracker was like one thing that I wished I could have done sooner, because I want to know, like, does Maywick even find you if you don't have the tracker?
I am
Does,
also
like, does
curious
that
about
even
that.
have, yeah, does it even happen? And so I'm really sad that I didn't get to it sooner, because I feel like it could have changed some really interesting things in the story. But yeah.
Interesting. So talk a bit about Lem and Mina. So like the reminder for the audience here is like a father daughter, maybe surrogate father, surrogate daughter scenario
Mm-hmm.
here. You are kind of given the opportunity to babysit Mina so that Lem can get shifts on a ship in the hopes that he'll get a ticket to get to leave on that ship.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, I only got, like, I finished the babysitter clock and that was all
Mm-hmm.
I did. So I don't know what happens after that. I would love to hear.
Yeah. So with Mina and Lem, I babysat, got through it, and we ended up eventually working enough so that we got tickets to get entered into the lottery for the Sidereal Horizon. So we're super excited. The day comes, you have to wait like 5 or 6 more cycles. You know, as with the rest of this game, you just got to wait a lot of the time for the drawing to happen. And eventually we go, and it's the day that we think, you know, whether or not we make it, we're going to find out who gets to go into this sort of next adventure. Again, funded by what is it, Celis Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
This group of rich folks from the core, which is like a main hub of the space society that is in this world. They're trying to fund this like new world that's got more freedoms and more rights for folks, and the place where, you know, we can create a new life that's a bit more equitable to people. uh when you have the lottery, things go awry, and it turns out, whether or not, and they kind of leave it up to a little bit up to guessing. I don't think that they had like the numbers, because the authorities are like, okay, we're going to use your Celis Foundation ID numbers to like draw the winners, and your character's like, I don't think I have this number. Like, what is this ID that we're talking about? And so there's sort of this theory that they weren't really planning on letting people onto the ship in the first place. It was all just a sham.
Oh.
You know, this lottery was a sham. So there's a time period where Lem kind of just goes to find work. He doesn't really talk to you. He's obviously devastated by this news, because this was the chance for him to take Mina and live off world and like make something of their lives. But then you can investigate the Sidereal Horizon, and you interact with a fellow named Castor. Did you ever meet Castor?
I became a low ender, which let me meet
Yes.
Castor. And that was I only had one conversation. We played a game of like checkers, and that was about it.
Yes. So Castor, you originally meet him and he plays like a game with you, but he eventually meets you up in the hub, and he's like, I heard you need access to the Sidereal Horizon, and basically says, I can get you and your friends' IDs to get on this ship, but you've got to do something for me. So again,
Hmm.
going back into that transactional mode, he eventually basically wants to plant a tracker on you to keep an eye on what's going on with the Foundation as you're in this sort of new world making your new lives. And so you can choose whether or not you agree, and you're willing to take that tracker, essentially be a tool again
Wow.
for the ability to get yourself and your friends passage on this ship, or you can choose to not, or you can do a little bit of both, which was what I did. And I essentially tricked Lem and Mina and said I was going to go with them,
Oh.
but I let them go, and I stayed behind. And
Oh.
I stayed on the ship, because partially because I felt like there wasn't really a way for me to get, at the time, any stabilizer, which I was still dependent on. Later on, I got skills where I'm like, dang it, I could have gone with them because like I have the skill now to make stabilizer from scrap, and I can make the special like mushroom whatever concoction, and it's like that's fine. So I'm a little sad because I was like, dang it, if I had the knowledge that I had later, I would have maybe made a different choice. But I chose to stay on the eye.
Wow.
Also because it was a little mini active resistance because I didn't want Caster to use me as a tool. And that really like soured the deal for me. So
you know what's interesting? Because I only had that one interaction where we played games. My only note for him is he seems like he's treating me like a person.
Yeah.
So
which,
that sucks.
You know, what I think is really interesting, because here's like, I think there's like the differences in transactional nature, because like friendships involve transaction, right? There is this like give and take, but I think there is this really important difference, which you're kind of highlighting, in that there's a difference between, oh, I'm going to babysit for my friends because they got to work and I know they do me a solid if they need to, versus like people assuming your help and taking your help without your agency and awareness. And that's what really soured it for me. Was Caster, at a certain point, he gave me this, like, he was telling me about the tracker and I was like, you didn't tell me that this was the deal. And I was pushing back a little and he was like, I'm at least telling you it's happening. I could have done this without you knowing. And I was like,
oh, hell no.
Fuck you. I was so pissed at that line. Honestly, I was enraged. I was like, this honestly makes you, in my eyes, worse than like Ethan, because Ethan was straight up with me, you know. Like he was deceptive and he tried to trick me, but I knew that he was going to probably backstab me at some point. Caster, he came to me as if I was this like friend that we're going to exchange stories, we're going to play games, and the way that he treated me at the end, I was so angry.
That's infuriating.
Yeah.
It's like, because at first, as you were describing, it's like, well, maybe him asking you to wear a tracker is a little different. It's like, well, it's different, like, I'm wearing a bug or a wire to go and do this mafia sting versus someone has low-jacked me and put a tracker in my blood. Like, two very different things. But now that you've clarified that other part, it's just like, oh no, he's the same. He's the same.
It really annoyed me. And again, it's like, maybe had I pursued other side quests, and this is the thing I think became really apparent to me in this game as a whole, and kind of just in like life in general. It's like you can only do so much with the information that you have available. Oof. I think that was a really, really poignant thought that kept coming back, where I'm like, if I had just known a little bit more, I would have made a different decision. If I had just known that this was going to be a thing, I would have maybe used these resources because I wouldn't have needed to hoard them. You know, it's like, it's hard because I think this game is that personified, that in game form.
I totally agree with that. Well, did you feel satisfied by the Lemon Mina storyline?
I did. I was really, really sad, but in my head, again, at the time, I didn't think I would have been able to survive the trip, honestly. And like, I had not yet removed the tracker. And so I was like, I don't want to pull SNARP's attention over there, which probably I would have, like thinking ahead. So I was pleased with the end of my Lemon Mina arc, because knowing that they were able to get off, and who knows what life is going to be like in this new place, but hopefully it at least affords them a different opportunity. So I was pleased with it.
I love that. I would love to talk about my other favorite storyline, which is the Neovend storyline.
Yes.
Did you play all through this?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I loved it.
I don't know if I got to the full ending. So where we left off was we have these hunters and killers. The hunters, we've kind of found a way to get them to kind of hunt themselves or like hide themselves, because they know that they're just as illegal sentient as we are. And so it kind of like short-circuited them. And we learned that there are these killers and that they are up in the hub. So you can go up to the hub and you have Neovend, who, we didn't talk about this. At the end of that first like story beat, transforms into like Super Saiyan Neo Vend and becomes the Navigator, which that character design was so cool. Like the strings and the circles and everything all connected. Like I just love that character design. So you get to the hub, you go to put Navigator now into the hub, and you go into cyberspace with them, and you see Killer there, and Killer is like a shark. And that said, because Killer has just been swimming about and his coat has been deteriorating, he now is blind. And what you realize is that this is kind of a trap in a way, and that the Navigator, just by being in the presence of this shark, like it's eating away at the lines and nodes that the Navigator uses to move around. And so you get like a really short clock to see if you can save Navigator from Killer. I love this. I really enjoyed this part. And eventually like free the Navigator, and you're left with a choice. You can kind of kill or end Killer, or you can kind of let it persist and run out its life. And I chose to let it persist and run out its life. So what did you do in that scenario?
I also chose to let it persist. I think the statement, because they give you 3 options. Did I write down what I put? Yeah, I did not write down what I put, but I wrote down what Neoven says afterward. But I basically, I wrote down, I will not kill another being. And then Neoven is kind of like, but is it another being? And so then Neoven starts to talk about like this idea of sentience. I also said I don't want it to suffer. And Neoven says to suffer, it must be sentient. And so it's this really great discussion of, again, reinforcing that discussion of who do we think has sentience? Who do we think we count as human, or maybe with us enough that what we do to it matters? You know, this idea of like, how do our actions impact a thing? And when do we decide we care about when our actions impact a thing?
Yes. The really line that I had was, is Killer a being or a system? Which I thought was like that critical question. The other quote that I had at the end of that section was, Navigator says, I have never considered friendship without need for personal gain, which was kind of like the thesis of this game in just like one statement. Such an interesting idea. And then he says, there's this other part of the ship, the Greenway, and it's all cloudy to me and I can't see what's going on, but there might be something else there. So this was maybe my favorite part of the whole game. Going to the Greenway, going to cyberspace, and everything's dark. Like it looks like there's a big fog cloud over the whole area. And if you hack appropriately, you find the gardener. What an incredible character. And unfortunately, and this is, I'm so curious to see if you got to do, if there was another phase. So there must be, but I didn't find it. They give you a seed if you engage well. So did you get to do something with the seed? Because I did not.
Yeah, I started it, and actually I am not done yet with that quest. I'm at the point where I'm not going back, and I want to finish some of the quests that I left, because I think my technical ending was like, I think it was called Left Behind, but it was like the Lemon Mina quest, and that was like an ending. And so I'm now going back and trying to get the other stuff, and that gardener quest is one that I'm going to be working on, because I got the seed and that's where I'm at currently. But I'm pretty sure there is, I think if I've read correctly and heard from folks correctly, at least like 2, maybe 3 endings that relate to the gardener and like some of the stuff that can happen there. So
did you join the commune?
I did, yes. Loved the food. Like I felt like it was my cheat code for like energy and like everything. Like it was so nice.
It was so good. And it was just like, it was almost like this ideal state, except for they had to live totally separate from the bulk of the population, which is just kind of like raises like inherent questions about like, what does it mean when like you found something that works just for you and you're not necessarily taking the effort yet to see how you can support other people, which I think is a worthwhile thing to consider. I was wondering, because I just don't know, like I guess I assumed that I was going to be using the seed with that group, but there was no opportunity. Like I took that storyline pretty far and I learned a lot about like the mushrooms and the ecosystem and how it's like this ecosystem should have burned out a long time ago and we don't understand why it hasn't. So I assumed we'd be doing something with the seed there, but like I don't know if that is where it happens, if it's maybe the farm or something else.
Yeah, I haven't finished it, so I don't know either. I'm hoping by this weekend, when we do the hangout, I'll be able to like speak to that because, again, that area, because partially because I think it's just like the last area I got to out of everything was the area that I feel like I least explored. Like there was this other side quest having to do with refugees coming into the eye that I also just barely started and scratched the surface of before like the credits kind of like the ending rolled. So
Yeah.
I want to go back and actually like get some of those done.
I didn't get to do the refugee story either. Like once you first make your way to the Greenway, you meet two characters that are clearly like a refugee story. I thought they seemed really interesting, but I didn't even find them again after that moment. I spent a lot of time gardening mushrooms and just like selling mushrooms and opening my mushroom farm. That was where I spent a lot of my time at the end. I actually haven't talked about my ending. My ending centered around Bliss, the person who gives you kind of a 50-50 stake in the company at the center of the hub, and like everything goes wrong and goes wrong, but on the third try it goes right. But my storyline ended between Bliss and Ankita, the spacer merchant or spacer mercenary that you are doing work for. Did you go through the Ankita storyline?
I did. That I think was my like official, because again, the Left Behind ending, quote, quote, was like, that was the ending of Mina and Lem. Or I don't know if it was called Left Behind. I think it was. But then I stayed on the ship after they left, and that's what afforded me the opportunity to finally do the Bliss storyline because I couldn't afford it beforehand because I was too poor.
You were too busy babysitting.
I was too busy, doing everything that I probably shouldn't have done. Just wasting my time.
The Ankita storyline was one of those classic, like almost trolley problem type storylines. So basically, you learn after you get the ship core to them that the person that they robbed is somewhere on the Greenway, and if you can track them down, you don't even have to pull the trigger. Just let them know where Ashton is. So I find Ashton and I call, but then I'm like, actually, I haven't found him. I just found like the clue. So don't come yet. Right. But Ankita comes anyway. And you see a sleeper that is connected to the stolen ship mine core. And they look like they're in an odd angle. Something's not quite right. And Ankita comes anyway. And the long story short is Ashton is in love with a sleeper and stole the ship mine core to save the sleeper's life. And after a pretty tragic turn of events, Ankita kind of accidentally kills both of them. Oh, that was so hard.
It was heartbreaking. Ugh.
And it was also like, I feel like there wasn't a ton of romance in this game. And it was one of the few romantic beats that I got to see was a sleeper romance story, which I thought was interesting.
I think it was the only one that I saw. I don't know if you caught anything else, but that was the only hint of romance that I got in the game.
What does that say? That's so interesting.
Yeah.
But, essentially, like on the same day that my Maywick clock ran out and my tracker got removed, the other thing that happened was Ankita was the next job for Bliss up at the top of the hub. And you help Ankita fix their ship. And Bliss tells you they're going to leave on this ship and you get the opportunity to go with. And I left with them. So it was a really fascinating, like, I'll never trust you again. I don't know that I can ever forgive you for what you did, but you have the opportunity to kind of like earn my trust going forward, and I will take this ride. So
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting the game to end. I thought there was going to be a lot more. And I was like,
Yeah.
I texted Jenny. I was like, I think I accidentally finished the game. Was I supposed to do that?
No, remember this week was end game week. So as long as you're done with the Maywick clock, I think at any point you can kind of trigger an ending depending on just what quests you have.
Mm.
Yeah, where I would love to know, just coming out of this game, what are some of the thoughts you have about community building in systems that aren't designed to support community building? Like, this game is all about living in a world where in many ways you have to be transactional to survive. And you don't have time to like make friends. And so what are you coming out of this sort of thinking about community and that transactional nature of relationships and friendship?
Wow, what a difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is that whole thing that if you keep your populace so busy that they can't like look up and reflect about what's going on, it's really easy for there to be like literally generations of people that are kind of oppressed and not able to kind of like come together to solve problems because like just survival requires 100% of your energy. The thing that stood out to me was the lack of judgment. When you are talking with people, the Yatagan group, which is kind of a gang, but they position themselves like mini gangs as kind of protecting a group of people that are vulnerable. You have people that are pulling kind of shitty deals and stealing from you and not giving you the things they promise. And it was really hard for me to look on a lot of those situations with negative judgment, knowing just how hard life was for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really struggled. Like, it seemed like a lot of the communities that I found were deeply flawed in some way. The Yatagan group was kind of a community. The commune, that was kind of off doing their own thing, was kind of a community. The mechanics that came through were kind of a community. Like, I am struggling to answer that, Jenny, because it's hard to recognize what was people just trying to like get by versus like what was community in the way that I would traditionally think about it. So I don't know, like, what were your thoughts?
Mm, I feel like one of the big things I got out of it was how it isn't futile to have like hope or attempt to make connections despite places maybe not being conducive to making connections. Like, I think, although the Bliss storyline was really good, I think from a story standpoint, but I think the storyline I was most personally invested in the entire time was Lem and Mina. And I think it didn't serve me to really help them out. Like, I didn't have to get them the passes. I could have also just gotten it for myself and not really thought about them. But I think knowing that in this game world, I made a difference perhaps to someone else, even if maybe like it doesn't change anything in the big grand scheme of things. Like, that to me was an exercise of like, there's power and purpose even in doing one good thing that can maybe make a difference for one other person. And I think even though it was foolish of me to try and like trust Ethan, or like foolish of me to sort of run with Fang as long as I did, I feel like it was something that by the end I was like, well, I'm glad that even though it wasted maybe my money and energy, I'm glad that I at least gave them the chance, and that I could go to like sleep at night in my dingy apartment in the low end, knowing that at least I gave them the chance and that it wasn't me that tried to like stop that connection from happening.
Like the thing that helps you sleep at night. You know, you kind of one-shotted in a way. Like, you did the thing where like you chose uh the single individual and said like, I'm going to invest in that person.
Yeah, I should try playing differently maybe. But it's hard. I don't know. I think that's just the kind of like when I play, I feel like especially with characters, if I like grasp onto a character and I can help them in a game, I'm like I will do everything I can for that character. So
I think it says something very good about you, that like you're the kind of person that like deeply wants to maybe live in a world where you can make the sacrifice to help out some individual or some couples in your community, like do something, and you're willing to do that at your own expense. And maybe games are one of the places where you get to play that out and kind of from end to end see what that feels like.
yeah, I'll be sending you your invoice in after this podcast recording. Thank you for that.
I think there's something really beautiful about that, Jenny.
Oh,
And, you know, we've
thanks.
talked about like several times in these games that there's something about the truth of connecting in like emotionally investing and connecting to a game, that there's something true about experiences that we get to have because of that. And yeah, I think there's just something. I turned heel and went like full scale selfish. So it says the opposite about me, perhaps. But like, I can become apparently very mercenary and cutthroat. But yeah, I think there's something about like you finding that truth in a lot of the games we play, where you get to like make the sacrifice, see end to end what it feels like when like that person you really want to help gets to their happy ending. I think that's really cool.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Again, folks, this is a shorter episode than normal because we've just got we've got schedules and things going on. Summertime is busy. But we are going to have a discussion this weekend on more of the endings, more of the experience of playing. I know, like, we haven't even talked about Sabine. I don't know if you've continued at all on Sabine's side quest. Me neither.
I continued until like Yadigan showed up, and then I was like, nope, she burned me. I'm done. Like it was the same thing as a lot of these other people. I was like, I'm out.
Bridges burned, destruction, ground salted, no
Yep.
more. Yeah.
I've salted the earth.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Or the fields.
Yeah, no, my hope is before the weekend, I'm gonna go through and try and basically like play through as many of the different endings and sort of the quests that I did. There was still a lot of quests I didn't finish. So I'm trying to get through the rest of that. I guess any last thoughts on Citizen Sleeper?
I have something that felt unresolved, and I'm going to share what that is. And I would love to know if you had things that you felt were unresolved at the point of your ending here. The thing that I felt was unresolved was learning anything about how true Sleeper's background was. You know, I engaged with the mushroom seller guy at Etish, I can't remember his name, the guy that sells mushrooms.
Yeah. Oh, what was his name?
He asks you to tell stories. Emphas, thank you. And if you tell enough stories, you start talking a little bit about what you remember. And it was just like, well, I get flashes here and there. And then the second I try to put anything more specific to them, they're gone and I can't hold on to them. And it's just like, I was really, really curious about who you were before you were a sleeper, if you were before you were a sleeper. And that was the one thing that I felt really unresolved on. And I couldn't find the quest. Like when they asked the thing that I was really the most interested in, like the truth of what happened to me was the thing that I chose. And that was the thing that I got the least amount of closure or information on.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. You know, and it's kind of funny because in my head, and partially maybe because I set myself up this way, because I chose again sort of the opposite, where I was like, my goal is like new life. What is my future going to look like? While I was sort of in a sense of like bittersweetly remembering, like, oh, there is a past me. There is someone who is my original, I guess, sleeping somewhere. I also felt like, you know what? I'm different from them and I have my own like stash of memories that I've now created, and like my past is my past and I'm going to move on. So I didn't even think really twice about the past me.
You fully severanced.
I did. I was like, I'm just, well, and I think this idea of like, it's my memory, and, there's something like to knowing where you came from, I think is really important, but also, I felt like, I don't know, I felt like enough of my own person that I felt like I could move on and be okay.
Yeah. So was there anything that felt unresolved? Like, I know you're going to go back and play some more storylines, but like,
I mean, yeah, there were so many side quests. I think like, what's her name? Tala at the bar.
Yeah.
There was a distillery that we were making that I didn't finish because I locked myself out of that because I was moving on. So I think there were side quests that were technically unfinished that I want to do, but I quite liked that things were left unfinished in a narrative sense of, this is kind of how life works. Like if I were to move on, like other people's lives are going to continue. They're going to have to figure out how to make the distillery or keep gathering mushrooms. And it felt like, even though it was unsatisfying from a personal completionist standpoint,
yes.
It felt satisfying in the sense that it felt very real and very messy in a way that normally I don't like in games, but I appreciated in this one.
Love that. Oh, can we talk about, sorry, one big reveal is that you're on what was at least at one point a giant circle, and like the rim of that circle, like it's not until I was on the hub and started like looking at the language that I was like, oh, they call the rest of this the rim? And is there a full circle ship here that like only a little bit is left of? That is wild.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think we had put like a stopper in it maybe after our first podcast, because I think I had gone to the hub, or one of us had gone to the hub, and I was like, oh, we should wait to talk about this.
I think it was you.
And I totally forgot about that. Yep. But yeah, no, it's kind of incredible. I will say how you start in such a small subsection, and the more you explore the wheel, and like by the time you get to like up to the waist of one area, and like you just see the expanse. And I think that's really cool. And it kind of, I don't know, there is the sequel that's coming out next year. There are the DLC, which we have not talked about, which are available for folks who, if you want to play more. But like, I think the potential for this to be an entire universe is really interesting to me, versus just like, because we're on a spaceship and you kind of forget that at times, but like this is just a tiny microcosm of what this universe holds.
I agree. There's a lot more to this world that I'm very curious about. And it's like, it's so interesting that in a story in space, you are so confined to what is ultimately a very small cross section of reality. It's something to think about.
Yeah. So what we're going to be doing is next week, we are actually taking the week off. There are summer plans afoot. And so we just decided it'd be easier just to take the week off, start our next game, our August game, a little bit later, but that's because it's also a shorter one. So we don't have to worry about taking less time in August. We are going to be going to the wilderness of Wyoming, I believe. And we're going to be playing Firewatch. So if you haven't yet picked it up, please, and you'd like to join in, please go ahead and grab that. As always, you can play at your own pace. Just know that we will be playing it episodically over the month of August, and you can join in the conversation every week. Starting, let me look at the calendar, starting on August 6th. So that's when the first podcast for Firewatch will be coming out. Yeah, I'm very excited. It is one of those indie classics. I think pretty much everyone who plays indie games has either heard of it, played it, or kind of like knows a little bit about it. And I think it's going to be a really good one, especially because it's summertime. So it's kind of, 'tis the season.
Tis the fire season.
Yes.
Well, hecky grace, y'all. Thank you for being a sleeper. Excited for you to become a watcher. And we'll see you next time on Geeks and Grounds. Bye.
Bye.